My co-authors is my wife, Karin, and Dr. Łukasz Krzyżanowski from Warsaw University. Radom, we are speaking about the town called Radom, which is, you can see it, over here. Here it's Warsaw, and you can see the city of Radom over here. A city in central Poland, 100 kilometers south of Warsaw. Radom was known as an important industrial center for leather, furniture, metal, and ceramic manufacturing, as well as state-owned armament factory. In Sadko, the suburb of Radom, there was a military airfield. During the first days of the war, the Germans bombed the airfield, destroying aircraft and the hangars. During the occupation, the Luftwaffe used the airfield to train pilots for the Eastern Front. By the end of the war, it was mined and heavily damaged. Radom had 3 municipal hospitals. The general one, named after St. Kazimierz, epidemic after St. Zygmunt, and the Jewish hospital. In 1939, around 30,000 Jews lived in Radom, making up 1/3 of the city's population. The Germans occupied Radom on September 8, 1939. The general government was created in October 1939, and Radom became the capital of one of the districts. In November 1939, the Germans formed the Judenrat. Soon after the beginning of the occupation, Jews were persecuted, shops were looted, individual Jews were targeted by German soldiers, many Jews were used as forced labor in the city or elsewhere. This is a picture of the Radom ghetto entrance. In April 1941, 2 ghettos were established in the city, and the Jews were forced to move in. A large ghetto in the city center and a small one in this nearly suburb of Gliwice. Both ghettos were gated and guarded. Hunger and dreadful sanitary conditions prevailed. During the first half of 1942, there was increasing terror, arrests, murders, and deportation to concentration camps. The Nazis liquidated the small ghetto on August 4 and 5 of 1942 with the help of the Polish Blue Police. Some Jews were shot on the spot, while most were deported to Treblinka death camp. A few hundred people, mostly men, were transferred to the large ghetto. Some 10 days later, on August 16th and 17th, the large ghetto was also liquidated. Most of the inhabitants were deported to Treblinka, and all patients in the hospital were murdered in their beds. Approximately 3,000 Jews were left in the city and used as forced labor, primarily in the armament factory. This is a picture of the building of the former Jewish hospital in Radom, founded in 1848. It had 25 beds. By the 20s and later it grew to 50 beds. The hospital was financially maintained with municipal support and individual donation. This is a picture made nowadays. A few words about Dr. Israel Kleinberger. Both my wife and myself met him during our childhood, so it's a personal also topic here. Attention. Kleinberger was born in Krakow, studied medicine there and in Vienna. He specialized in otolaryngology and general surgery. In 1927, he moved to Radom and started working as a surgeon at the St. Kazimierz Hospital. In 1929, he became head of the surgical department. In 1934, he became director of the Jewish hospital, and in 1937 was also promoted to its chief physician. At the outbreak of the war, Kleinberger was drafted into the Polish army as a medical officer. He was held as a prisoner of war by the Germans for several months and was sent to Ludwigsburg near Stuttgart as head of the prisoner of war hospital there. In February 1940, he was sent back to Radom, taking up his former position as head of the Jewish hospital. Later in the ghetto, he worked in the hospital for infectious diseases. This is a letter we found at Zurich, a letter from Kleinberger to the AJDC office in Warsaw, May 15, 1940, asking for financial assistance, and you can see the original and formal paper of the hospital. In November 1943, he was deported to a labor camp in Auschwitz. In August 1944, was sent to Auschwitz and then moved to Ohrdruf, a sub-camp of Buchenwald. Toward the end of the war, he was one of the prisoners marched from Buchenwald to Theresienstadt. During this march, he tried to escape and was shot in the leg, which had to be amputated later. In 1948, he and his wife Maria, also a concentration camp survivor, came to Israel. He worked as a physician for the Israeli army and in other medical services. In my childhood, I met him several times in a town named Netanya in Israel when he visited my grandfather, Dr. Tzvi Levin, who had worked as a gynecologist at the same Jewish hospital in Radom. San Kazimierz Hospital in Radom in those days, today it is a hotel. Our presentation casts light on the unknown study made in the Radom ghetto. The original report was discovered in the archives at the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, Zurich. It surveyed 709 cases of typhus during the 1940-41 epidemic. The report thoroughly discusses the clinical course, morbidity, mortality, complications, and laboratory results. The study is called The Role of Azotemic States in the Course of Typhus. It was written by Dr. David Wajnapel, director of the Jewish Infectious, also called the Contagious Diseases Hospital in Radom, and the bacteriologist Miss Anna Herschthal in September 1941. It is a really remarkable document, a scientific study performed under the extreme conditions of the Nazi occupation with very limited supply, although this hospital was located outside the ghetto. Wajnapel survived and published in German after the war a fuller report. He later mentioned in his memoirs in English. From survivors' testimonies, we get an idea of the condition of this study, but also of its importance for the Nazis. In addition to their medical duties, the doctors and nurses performed the task of cleaning and painting the hospital premises, many times working through the night. A special mention must be made of the fine work done by the hospital manager Maria Hartmann, a deportee from Lodz. Dr. Nachum Shenderovich also set up a laboratory which was operated by the bacteriologist Anna Herschthal, another deportee from Lodz. She was assisted by Miriam Yeshurin. In this primitive and difficult environment, the staff did research on typhoid fever, which was in interest to the government. Now we found that Dr. Weissenegger, a Nazi physician, read the paper prepared by the staff of this Jewish hospital at a medical conference in Krakow without indicating its authors. This paper was later published in a German medical journal, Leben and Gesundheit. This is, after the war, as I said before, David Wajnapel published in Stuttgart the full report in German. And despite the harsh environment, the obvious interest of the Nazi occupiers in this typhus study made it possible for Wajnapel and his team to obtain the necessary technical supplies. Even contemporary medical literature was at least in part available to them. I must say that they have a really modern-like list of references including Randerat that you have just mentioned. Amazing, I didn't know who was Randerat and just followed his CV and he really quotes, and how did he manage to read the papers published in 1940 and 1941. In this study version of 1941 and 47, Wajnapel mentioned Anna Herschthal and as his co-author. What were the medical conclusions of the Radom typhus study in 41? First, typhus is also known as spotted fever because most patients had red skin rash of some degree. The Radom team proved that there is no correlation between the extent of the rash and the severity of the disease. Two, the gravest symptoms of typhus are changes in the central nervous system which cause brain damage and may lead to disability or death. The third conclusion, typhus usually causes renal failure, which then exacerbates brain damage, thus often leading to death. The fourth, in the absence of antibiotics, available in Europe only after 1945, the Radom team found that intravenous or subcutaneous infusions of saline solution or glucose improved renal function and chances of survival. The authors were not sure if the neurological complication occurred because of the disease itself or because of the high level of urea and creatinine. They call it azotemia, today we call it uremia. As I said, after immigrating to the States, Wajnapel published his memoir and illustrated himself these few pictures, sketches that I will show you. On the left is Dr. David Wajnapel and the bacteriologist Anna Herschthal. Dr. Jerzy Borisovich was a neuropsychiatrist, and only after his death he was awarded the Rightus among the nations. He came to Radom with his family in 1939, just at the outbreak of the war, and started working in a primitive, neglected psychiatric institution. As its director, he began using all available modern treatment. Since the building was unsuitable for any other purpose, the Germans spared these patients and staff, and under Borisovich's initiative, the hospital hid Jews. Borisovich was made neuropsychiatric consultant to the Jewish Hospital for Infectious Diseases, and as such he went in and out the ghetto. He helped the staff and the patients in many ways, also bringing medical supplies. Dr. Anna Herschthal, who also worked in the hospital, later testified, "I met Dr. Jerzy Borisovich during the work from December 41 to August 42 in that hospital. I was an assistant of David Wajnapel, who greatly valued not only the knowledge of Dr. Borisovich, but also his interest and brave help for Jews. Many years ago, I corresponded with Dr. Stanley Wajnapel in New York, an American colleague of mine in rehabilitation medicine. Only recently, while searching for the Radom study, researching the Radom study, did I realize he is the son of David Wajnapel. Although he has rare eye disease, which has caused blindness, he is a professor of rehabilitation medicine, a classical pianist, and an authority of acupuncture and Charles Dickens. Throughout his medical career, Dr. Wajnapel has advocated for disability rights. He was president of the American Society of Handicapped Physicians in the early 1980s, and president of the New York Society of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation in 1991. Just the one word, just yesterday we went to know more details about Weizsäcker, the Nazi doctor who presented the work of Wajnapel in Krakow and published it under his name. And only yesterday I got a letter from my colleague and friend Dr. Volker Rölke, that he found in one of the archives in Germany details about this doctor who was an enthusiastic Nazi, may I say so. But in 1944, very, very much, not only as a doctor, a Nazi doctor, but also as an official activist. He joined the party in 1930, only 2 or 3 years after finishing medical school. And in 1944, he deserted his army, went to Austria, was caught by the Gestapo, and he was jailed. Am I right, Karin? That's correct? More or less. And spent some time in the jail. After being released, he went to Spain, but later on he returned and was caught by the American and jailed again as a Nazi. But we are going to follow his career and history and maybe other publications. And maybe next time we shall meet here, I will have more details about this amazing story of a Nazi doctor cooperation with the group of physicians in the ghetto. Thank you very much.